We're back with the open letter to President Obama with our show that I sent in. We have a series of more questions too for these issues. We can start with, or we left off with the refugee crisis, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You say that the refugee crisis is a result of American gangs. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, I pretty much report what other people are saying, other people who are gathering this kind of intelligence, statistics, and are on the front line of all these events, and I integrate it into the bigger picture, adding my analysis. So, what has happened here, and I believe I mentioned this, on page 5, we have to go a little bit back in history. Not too far back, I don't want to scare anybody. So we're just going back 20 years, 30 years. What happened in the 80s? Well, there was a movement, immigration, people emigrated, refugees again from Central America to the United States. What were they emigrating from? They were emigrating from civil wars in which our country was heavily involved. We're talking Iran-Contra scandal, which everybody seems to forget, conveniently. But it's a reality. So while we were overthrowing governments and favoring some regimes over others and causing turmoil and strife in that part of the world, Central America, okay, that caused a mini refugee crisis. So these people came to, most of them came to the United States, some of them went up to Canada. And in fact, I personally worked with a number of them while I was in Canada as a cultural interpreter, but that's a whole other story. And where did they go? Well, they went, like most refugees or most immigrants from any other nation coming to the United States. Where do they go? Where do they establish themselves where there are people of their own kind. Okay, typical immigration pattern. So they establish themselves a lot of them in Los Angeles. And what happened? Well, once they're in Los Angeles, once they were in these Hispanic community of low socioeconomic status, high gang rate, well, they integrated themselves with that aspect of American society, and they formed gangs of their own, namely the famous MS-13, MS-18, and what do we have? Okay, they became hardened, fighting, trying to survive in the midst of the Mexican gangs. And then some geniuses from our own law enforcement agencies and governmental agencies, government, presidential advisors, etc., decided it would be a good idea to export those people, deport them. So we had them deported back to Central America. Of course, while they had their stay in America, a lot of them were they were psychologically traumatized by the Civil War. One of my clients that I worked with, just to give you an example, as a small child, he witnessed his entire family executed before him while he was hidden. That's the degree of war that they were experiencing in Central America. So a lot of these people were young, traumatized, others were soldiers who fought in the Civil War. They arrive to the United States and they become gang hardened. So they learn gang culture, how to organize themselves, and how to relate to one another, and have establish all these contacts with other gangs in the United States. And so we deport them. We send them back to Central America, particularly El Salvador, which had no experience and no infrastructure, okay, no capability dealing with this imported. Now they're American gangs. They're no longer Central American gangs. Now they're American gangs. So the Mara Salvatrucha and the MS-18, MS-13, MS-18, they arrive there and they pretty much take over because they're hardened, they're experienced, they know how to organize themselves. They take over. So now what do the reports coming from organizations like the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, what do they say? They say, while in the past, dictatorships, coups, and civil wars displaced people from their homes in Central America, Haiti, and elsewhere on the continent, because that's the past. Nowadays, today, rampant gang violence and wars between narcos are dislocating an increasing number of people from Mexico, Colombia, and Central America. That's what I mean by blowback. So to paraphrase Malcolm X, the chickens are coming home to roost. Right? So, we caused the problem in the first place, okay, messing with their politics because we didn't like them because they were socialists or tending to be communists, etc. Okay, so we cause a problem. They come to our country as refugees in our country. Now they transform. Okay, they become Americanized. So they become more organized, more efficient at what they do. Okay, we're pretty good at what we do, even when it's bad. So then they go back to we deport them. We deport them to Central America, back to Central America. Now transform. They become even more organized. They're like a new predator with no competition. They took over, and now they are working in conjunction with the Mexican cartels, and now the MS-13, MS-18 are no longer street gangs. Now they're transnational gangs. Now they've gone international. Okay, and they're causing so much strife and turmoil that they're responsible for this mass exodus of children. Now again at our border. So what's going to happen? We let those people in. Okay, what's going to happen with those 70,000 refugees? Do we have the resources to reform them? Do we have the resources? I worked as a when I was doing my doctoral work as a PhD student in clinical psychology. I worked in a juvenile detention center, working with gang members, etc. Do we have those kind of resources and facilities to bring these people into the fold so they are productive, constructive members of society? Well, no, we don't. Where are they going to go? They're going to go just like 20, 30 years ago. The first sort of mini wave of refugees, they're going to go back to the streets, they're going to go back to Hispanic communities, and what are they going to do? They're just going to, they don't have the competencies, they don't have the core competency, okay, in order to integrate themselves productively into American society. So they're just going to go into the only opportunities for them, gangs. And so we have a vicious cycle.
Now this would take us to our next question that we've heard this before in other media cycles, and a lot of us have this, would love to hear your opinion on the issue about legalizing drugs. So the question would be, would legalizing drugs be a solution to this whole problem?
No. Maybe back in the 80s when I was working as an interpreter in the Canadian prison system and for the RCMP, maybe back then. But nowadays it just it would not solve the problem. And I'll explain why. The narco economy has become part of an integral aspect of the economies of these not just these nations. Okay, I'm not talking just about Mexico and Honduras, etc., and all the way down. No, too much a part of the economy of these ostracized communities within our own nation. Way back. Again, when I was working as a psychologist graduate student in the girls' rehab facility in San Diego, and I asked some of my patients, gangbangers, what they thought about legalizing drugs, and invariably they would say, "Hell no. How would I feed my family? How would they?" Okay, this is how they make a living. Okay, we're talking about at least 1.4 million gang members. Okay, this is how they make a living. They make a living fundamentally distributing the drugs for the Mexican cartels, and of course dealing with arms deals and extortion and other aspects of organized crime. That's what they do. Now, okay, if we legalized it, all of a sudden what would happen? What happened is that the price, the value of this commodity would drop. Okay, right now, what is estimated in terms of the economic benefit to Mexico, for example, from this illegal drug trade, is comparable to all the money, it's known in Spanish as remesas, all this money that's being sent back from Mexicans who are working in the United States and sent back to their homes. Okay, it's comparable to that. Now, if you legalized it, what would happen is that income would all of a sudden drop. Now, we're already experiencing the worst crisis of violence in Mexico since the revolution, and it's down. Now, this is creating a terrible crisis. You pull the rug out from under this economy, the economy people, all you're going to do is accelerate the drop. It's too late. It's too much a part of the economy. It's too much a part of the economy and the culture of these countries and our communities within the United States. You can't. It's the time for legalization to make a difference, a positive difference, is over. We're beyond that. That just wouldn't work. Already, drug cartels like the Zetas, what they have done is they've expanded their range of operations to other sorts of illegal activities, such as human trafficking and of course cloning DVDs, etc. So if you legalized it, okay, these cartels are organized enough. They're internationally organized enough that if you legalized these drugs, then their income from their revenue from illicit drugs would drop, and that would force them to increase, okay, their activities and other types of operations like kidnapping, extortion, etc., etc. More violence. So it's too late for that. These organizations are too powerful. The revenues that they bring into the communities and society are just they're too much a part of the culture, the economy. They're into politics. They fund politicians, campaigns, etc. The money laundering is keeping many businesses afloat, especially along the border. You see businesses, you never see anybody entering into the establishment, and yet they're still in business day after day, week after week, year after year. Now, how does that happen? Well, of course we know how it happens. Okay, everybody around here knows how it happens. They're laundering money. All of a sudden that dries up. That means those businesses go belly up, and what do their people do? They're not going to starve. Okay.
Yes. What about closing the border?
Closing the border.
Would that be
Now,
another...
a good deal of the violence that's been caused over the last 8 years in Mexico has been the result of this war on drug campaign. What did the war on drug campaign do? Did it decrease the flow of drugs? No, it did not. Okay, so all it did was it militarized the operations of these cartels. It hardened them. It's good old-fashioned competition. It made them more competitive. It made them more adaptive. Now, why the violence? Okay, once the United States and Mexico tightened up on the flow of these drugs, all of a sudden they had to fight amongst each other for access to the American market. And that's what increased the violence in a New Deal. Okay, now if you shut that down, what's going to happen is, okay, once again, the violence is just going to go up because they're going to fight amongst each other to get better access. But that violence is going to spill over. Right now, they're content with targeting Mexican officials, Mexican policemen, Mexican politicians, Mexican judges. Okay, you put a clamp on their livelihood, they will target American officials, American politicians, okay, American police officers. Okay, there's nothing magical or mystical about, and when you think about it, killing American judges or killing American police officers or killing American judges or politicians. It just isn't. Right now, it's not convenient. But if you put them between a rock and a hard place, that level of violence that we're experiencing south side of the border will move over north side of the border. And remember, they already have soldiers on the ground. And gangs are not just individuals that go around street corners. They are well integrated into the armed forces. They're of the American armed forces. They're well integrated into law enforcement, which is where they get a lot of their intelligence from.
Okay, so Would you say we're becoming our own victim on these war on drugs issues?
Well, the short answer to that question is yes. Okay. Now, that answer really, for it to make sense, to bring it into a proper context, requires us to take a broader view. What's happened here? Well, essentially, it's not just a matter of the war on drugs. It's something that goes much deeper into the core of American society, American politics, American economics. Now, if we go back to colonial times, we go back to the birth of our nation, end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, etc. What we have is America has tried to replicate pretty much the same kind of imperialistic model that it learned from Europe, from Great Britain, and from the other European nations. What did that model consist of? That model really consisted of going out into other parts of the world and enslaving these people, or colonizing, which is really two variations of the same theme. We pretty much forced them to work for us, to extract natural resources at very cheap labor for our economic benefit, that then we can import and we can work on and we can create products that are more expensive and force them to buy them. Okay? Now countries like Great Britain or Spain or France or Belgium, etc., what they did was they established colonies outside their borders. All right? So you have, for example, Britain in India. They have these colonies outside their borders. Now, outside their borders, that has a great advantage, is that you can commit all sorts of heinous crimes against these other peoples without the members of your own society really becoming aware of what you're doing. Okay? It's like out of sight, out of mind. They don't see it. Okay? All they care about, it's like the classic example that I often use, as you, my students know, often use, is the Opium Wars. What Great Britain did with China during the Opium Wars. It forced China, due to its superior military might, it forced China to open its borders to the influx of opium. Devastating China, but nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, there was some, to be fair and honest, there was some outrage amongst in British Parliament, but by and large, it was very different for the Brits than if they actually had it within their borders and their general population saw this. Okay? Now, by the time the United States establishes itself, well, it's a little too late to be going out. The world's taken. You can't go out and take a piece of Africa because Europe carved it up. You can't take a piece of Latin America because Spain had it, Spain and Portugal, etc. So what did it do? What it did is, within its borders, it created its own piece of colonized its own colonized population with the slavery, right within its borders, right there. Okay. Now, of course, plantations were also present in Brazil. Okay, but we were just due to capitalistic economy, we were much more efficient at it, and what we did to ensure that economic system would perpetuate itself over time is we created a differentiation based on race. Okay, that's where we have the one drop rule. If you have one drop of African American blood, that makes you black. So even my grandchildren are technically black, even though you wouldn't, any reasonable person would say, what are you talking about? But legally in the United States, that's what they are. Where does that come from? Why is race such an issue in America? And race is an issue in America. It's a social issue. It's a political issue because it's been an economic issue. It was indispensable for the formation and the building of the American Empire. Now, depending on whose statistics and how they calculate this, there's several $1 trillion, of labor that was never paid for, performed by these slaves. And that's what America was built on. Okay, so you have that aspect. Okay, I know we're running out of time, but you have that aspect. You have race and economy has been tied into American society, American cultural ideology from the beginning. Now that extended itself with the Native American, it's extended itself also to the Hispanic Americans, particularly the Mexican population. Okay. So you have race. Now, how does that tie into the war on drugs? Well, most of the history behind what made drugs illegal was racism. Why, when you start digging back and you find out why has marijuana been so persecuted and prosecuted? Because it was a good way to kick Mexicans out of the country that we didn't want anymore. We wanted them when we needed their cheap labor. Then all of a sudden we didn't want them because, well, we were having economic troubles and we just didn't want, we wanted America for white people. And so we had marijuana was a good way to kick them out. So that's how marijuana became illegal. Now if you think about it, if you do your research, you realize that there hasn't been a single case of anyone dying for marijuana overdose. Now, nearly 500,000 people die every year in the United States for tobacco consumption. Now, tobacco kills, yet tobacco is perfectly legal. Why is tobacco perfectly legal? Well, it pays taxes, etc. So that's a whole other can of worms. But racism, war on drugs. So marijuana was a good way to control the Mexican population. Opium, a good way to control the Chinese. Heroin, etc., a good way to control blacks. Now the origins of the war on drugs are racist. Racist, and then racism tied to economics. So there we have it. Politics, racism, economics, and of course the other factor here that we haven't mentioned yet, but I'm sure you'll have some questions for me, has to do with religion. And I know we're out of time, so let's take a break.
Thank you.